Let's get one thing clear. Medieval castles were cold. Not the throw on another blanket kind of cold. We're talking you can see your breath indoors cold. These places weren't built for comfort, they were built to withstand sieges, not to keep their residents cozy. There was no central heating, no radiators, and certainly no soft feather-filled duvets. So how did they survive? How did anyone in those drafty stone fortresses manage to make it through the night without freezing solid? Today, we're stepping back in time, into the shadows of those freezing halls, to uncover how medieval people fought the cold, and barely won. When we imagine castles, we see flickering candlelight on tapestries, roaring fires in great halls, and nobles lounging in fur-lined robes. Reality, brutal. Most castles at night were colder than the forests outside their walls. Those beautiful stone walls. They were your worst enemy. Thick, uninsulated, and utterly merciless, they absorbed cold like a sponge and held it for days. Inside, the wind whistled through cracks in the shutters. Floors were bare stone. Windows, if they were anywhere, just open holes or covered with thin oiled cloth. The moment the sun dipped below the horizon, warmth fled, and the chill crept in like an uninvited guest. The design didn't help either. Great halls were cavernous echo chambers, impossible to heat. Bedrooms perched high in towers were exposed to cutting winds. Spiral staircases became funnels for icy drafts. Castles weren't designed to be warm, they were designed to survive war. Heat, that was an afterthought, and what passed for heating was laughable by modern standards. The wealthiest rooms had open hearths, giant stone fireplaces that smoked more than they heated. Before chimneys, smoke drifted upward, filling the air with fumes instead of warmth. Poorer rooms had nothing but a small fire pit if they had anything at all. Servants, soldiers, and laborers often slept in unheated side rooms, or worse, hallways. Some curled up in kitchens or near stables just to steal a bit of animal heat. The poor might have been low on status, but in some castles they were actually warmer than the lord sleeping high above in a drafty tower. So, how did people fight back against this relentless cold? The bed, but not the kind you're picturing. Forget open mattresses and loose blankets. Medieval beds were fortresses of fabric. 4 poster frames hung with thick curtains formed a tent within the room. At night, those curtains were pulled shut, trapping body heat inside. Wealthier households lined them with wool or fur, layering blanket upon blanket until the sleeper was cocooned in warmth. Beds were raised off the freezing floor to avoid drafts. Straw or feather-filled mattresses provided a little insulation. And most importantly, people didn't sleep alone. Privacy took a back seat to survival. Families crammed together. Servants shared beds. Children bundled in with siblings. It wasn't comfort, it was containment. Once you climbed in, you stayed in until morning. But warmth wasn't just about beds, it was about constant labor. Servants worked tirelessly to keep their masters alive through winter nights. They preheated beds with heated stones, filled metal jugs with boiling water to serve as makeshift hot water bottles, and tended fires long after everyone else was asleep. They stayed up to add logs, adjust coals, or fetch extra blankets. The nobles' comfort often depended on 3 or 4 people working quietly through the night. And still, even with all this effort, lords and ladies weren't safe from the cold. Their tower chambers were often the coldest rooms in the castle. High winds, large windows with flimsy shutters, and a lack of insulation meant that winter illnesses, coughs, fevers, and deadly chills were constant threats. And then there were the true sufferers, the night guards, while others huddled under blankets. These men faced the elements head-on, standing watch on exposed battlements with icy winds cutting through their ragged wool layers. They had one job: stay awake, stay alive, and keep the castle safe. They stamped their feet, huddled together for warmth, whispered prayers, and sometimes drank strong spiced ale just to feel something in their frozen bodies. Failure wasn't an option. If a guard fell asleep and an enemy slipped inside, the consequences were fatal not just for him, but for everyone inside those walls. So how did people sleep in medieval castles without freezing? The truth, they barely did. They survived by clustering together, layering themselves in wool and fur, sleeping inside fabric tents, relying on servants, animals, and sheer willpower. Winter deaths were common. Cold didn't care about your rank, your wealth, or your title. It seeped through every crack, reminding everyone that in the battle between human ingenuity and nature, nature usually won. And yet they endured. They adapted. They passed down tricks and traditions, one bitter winter at a time. So next time you pull your duvet up to your chin and complain about a chilly night, remember this. Somewhere, centuries ago, someone was trying to sleep on stone, with frost on their breath and smoke in their lungs, and they survived. Not because they were warm, but because they refused to give in to the cold.